This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu holds a high-stakes geopolitical meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, with the future of Syria in the balance. Plus, a look into how a major Protestant denomination is taking a stand for the Scriptures, and etched in stone, how archaeology in Israel is proving the Bible. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Right now, Iranian forces in Syria pose a dire threat to Israel. One Iranian military leader says he's just waiting for the order to attack. And that's why a series of high-stakes geopolitical meetings come at a crucial time. It all centers on Russian President Vladimir Putin and his involvement in Iran and Syria. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently met with Putin about the Iranian threat. And on July 16th, President Trump also meets with the Russian leader. Following the meeting between Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Russian President Putin, Israeli reports said Russia was working to remove Iranian forces from Israel's border with Syria. It's the subject the Israeli leader came to discuss.
It's not new for you that our focus is on Syria and Iran.
Netanyahu has been working very hard to try to keep open lines of communication. Why? Because Russian military forces are operating just over the northern mountains of Israel in Syria. And Israel doesn't have a military conflict with Russia, and it does not want a military conflict with Russia.
Israel has its red lines inside Syria.
Israel cannot allow Iranian presence in Syria. Of course, we will in no way allow the Iranian bases or Hezbollah bases on the Israeli border. That's why the dialogue with the Russians is very important. And I really hope that also during these talks between Trump and Putin, these subjects will be addressed and will be solved.
The border continues to present a challenge to Israel. On Wednesday, Israel shot down a drone that violated its airspace. The IDF retaliated by hitting 3 targets inside Syria. And a top Iranian general has threatened Israel's destruction from just across the border. Today, an international Islamic army has been formed in Syria, and the voices of the Muslims are heard near the Golan. Orders are awaiting so that the custom of God vis-a-vis the eradication of the evil regime will land, and the life of this regime will be ended for good. The life of the Zionist regime was never in danger as it is now. In the meantime, the Syrian army, aided by Russian air support, is seizing strategic territory from rebel forces in southern Syria. A top Israeli intelligence group reports Iranian troops are also in the fight, often wearing Syrian uniforms to disguise themselves. All these boots on the ground threaten Israel's northern border. A key reason Prime Minister Netanyahu will insist Iran must leave Syria, either on its own or with help from the IDF. Here's more with Middle East expert Joel Rosenberg and his analysis of the current situation in the Middle East and the major players in the region. Talk about Putin's goals in the Middle East. What's his goals and his agenda?
The challenge with Vladimir Putin is that he wants to expand the influence of the Russian Empire. He wants to see Russia become feared, a place. He wants to be the go-to guy where every world leader comes to him. And the only place that he really has to maneuver is the Middle East. He's got Iran in his pocket. He's pulling Turkey into his orbit. Turkey, a NATO ally, but increasingly Turkey is moving to the dark side, moving towards Putin. Obviously, Bashar al-Assad in Syria is already in the Putin camp, and Putin wants to be seen as so powerful and so powerful and so influential in the Middle East that the Saudis need to come to him, that the Emiratis need to come to him, that the Jordanians, the Egyptians need to come to him. He's trying to flip all of them away from the United States, away from the West, into the Russian orbit. But I think what the truth is, the Russians under Vladimir Putin have an entirely different approach to the world than the Saudis, the Emiratis, and the Sunni Arab states and Israel. Because Russia has gone to bed with Iran. That's it. That's the plain truth. They have built an alliance that we've never seen in history, and it's dangerous. And the Saudis, the Emiratis, Israel, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the United States all have to be saying to him, you have to make your choice. Because if you're going to stick with this Iranian alliance, then you're going to be directly opposed to all of the rest of our interests.
As we reported today and last week, the Syrian army has seized more territory in southern Syria, and it's left an enormous humanitarian crisis in its wake. The Syrian army captured areas along its borders with Israel and Jordan, plus the main crossing into Jordan. This now more than 7-year-old civil war has caught thousands of Syrian civilians in the crossfire. Just behind me is the Israeli-Syrian border, and on the other side of the fence are thousands of Syrians who have fled the recent fighting. The UN estimates more than 300,000 people have fled their homes. This drone footage shows the sea of new tents. The IDF has reached out to help those who now call this home.
The main mission is to give as much humanitarian aid to the other side. We do it first because when you understand what's happening on the other side and you know that they don't have anything and they really suffer, you cannot stand aside and do nothing. I think it's part of what we know to do is to help other people who need it. They're neighbors on the other side.
Former IDF Lieutenant Colonel Marco Moreno developed this good neighbor policy several years ago. Now he works with a Christian relief organization coordinating operations with the IDF.
FAI, we are working on launching a team now, a medical team, inside the refugees camp in order to help them on the medical field. Because it will take a couple of days and, diseases will start. Children, will have issues. So FAI is engaging immediately. First of all, sending a medical team and also a relief, tents, babies' food, whatever we can supply.
They are working against the clock to save lives.
Right now it's critical to engage the issue of displacement and the refugees on the ground because it's the hottest months of the year right now. So in terms of dehydration and hunger and medical issues, we're seeing a mounting, escalating humanitarian crisis. And now is the time for believers to engage. The door is open. We have the access.
Thomas says they need help.
We need human bodies. We need salt and light people on the ground. So if you're a medical professional, education, psychological, trauma counseling, you name it, we need it. This is a field that is ripe and white unto harvest.
The crisis has formed a unique partnership.
If I'm an American that likes Israel and bless Israel so he can be proud in the IDF with the Christian ministry helping the Muslims.
If you'd like to know more about this situation, you can log on to fairelief.org. Well, Palestinians accuse Australia of making a declaration of war against them. Why? The country plans to withhold any financial aid to the Palestinian Authority if they continue to reward terrorists and their families. It's one more nation pressuring the PA to stop a policy many call pay to slay. The controversial policy provides money to convicted Palestinian terrorists and their families for attacking Israelis. The payments coming from this fund add up to more than $330 million each year. Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop objected to the policy, saying, "I am concerned that in providing funds for this aspect of the PA's operations, there is an opportunity for it to use its own budget to fund activities that Australia would never support." The PA describes the move as a declaration of war.
Australia now is just doing the bidding of the US, unfortunately, and Julie Bishop's statement is extremely insulting, and it shows the utmost ignorance of the realities of Palestinians living under a cruel and brutal and illegal Israeli occupation.
Australia's decision follows America's lead in passing the Taylor Force Act that also withholds aid until the PA ends the terror payments. Congress named the law after Taylor Force, a U.S. citizen killed in a 2016 terror attack in Israel. Meanwhile, Israel's parliament debated its own legislation to stop payments to the Palestinian Authority.
To this Palestinian enterprise that is called the Palestinian Authority, Mr. Chairman, it's very easy to get accepted. The only thing you have to do is to call Israelis to get arrested or killed and you get a job.
Scott Taylor's father, Stuart, sat in on the debate.
We are honored to have you here with us for the event to pass this bill and hopefully we shall pass it the second and the third call.
And pass it they did. Another multi-million-dollar penalty against the Palestinian Authority for encouraging and rewarding terrorism. Up next, one of the largest Protestant denominations in the world came to Jerusalem and took a stand for the Scriptures. One of the oldest Protestant denominations in the world is going through a crisis that could define its future for generations. It's an ongoing battle between today's culture and traditional Christianity. The face of the church around the world is changing, literally.
The leadership of the global church, without doubt, has passed on to the global south. And Africans are taking a lead. And this is a cause for great celebration. It's not the white man, or it's a religion of the Middle East, it's a religion of Africa, it's a religion of Asia. So for me, this is absolutely encouraging.
During this recent gathering of Anglicans in Jerusalem, it became clear one of the world's largest Protestant denominations is refocusing efforts to spread God's word to the nations.
What's so encouraging is that we have many people here from Africa or Asia. These countries only received the message of the gospel 150 or 200 years ago. They have believed the gospel, they remained faithful, and now God has sent them to us, especially in the West, to remind us that we must return to our gospel roots.
People in the U.S. would recognize the Episcopal Church as part of the Anglican Communion. The goal of this Jerusalem meeting was to create a roadmap for the future of this church body. It began in 2008 to uphold traditional church teaching and emphasize the critical importance of the Bible. Archbishop Stanley Antagali from Uganda believes this group exists to maintain the purity of the gospel.
It's all about Jesus, all about mission, evangelism, preaching the biblical gospel, so that we do not divert from the biblical truth. We remain focused on the Bible, the authority of the Bible, the teaching of Jesus Christ.
Members of this conference oppose the liberal teachings in some Western Anglican churches that embrace same-sex marriage and homosexuality. Those teachings led Archbishop Nicholas Oko from Nigeria to call on the Archbishop of Canterbury, the leader of the Anglican Church, to repent.
We would like him to know that a big chunk of people he's leading are complaining very badly about his direction, his trajectory. And so we would like him to change. That is to say that they must make a definite stand of repentance.
Representatives here address differences with those leaders and churches in a letter calling them schismatics who have departed from the teaching of the Bible and the historic doctrine of the church.
We must return to being faithful to Jesus despite what the culture is telling us.
Up next, a new book connects the dots between archaeology and the Bible when we come back. Israel contains some of the world's greatest archaeological treasures, and scientists often link their finds directly to the Bible. Now you can make those connections. It's a new book that provides an easy guide to match ancient artifacts with the Scriptures. During a visit to the Holy Land, Lizette Bassett Brody visited the Israel Museum. She found artifacts like this one, but when she looked for a catalog of these biblical treasures, she couldn't find one anywhere. So she decided to write one herself. That was 18 years ago. Her decision and years of hard work led to etched in stone archaeological discoveries that prove the Bible.
This is not a book on archaeology. It really is more about the Bible and then a little bit of archaeology, just to show that the stories within the pages of the Bible are historical and factual.
She says even Bible believers may not know what's been discovered.
I don't think that a lot of Christians realize how much physical evidence there is to support the scriptures.
One famous piece, or more accurately, thousands of pieces of evidence, are the Dead Sea Scrolls housed here at the Israel Antiquities Authority. This is the lab where experts examine those scrolls, discovered 70 years ago, that revealed a treasure written 2,000 years ago.
When something is not supported through archaeology, critics will jump on it as fast as possible and say, you see, there's no evidence, therefore the story is not true, and the Bible is wrong. What the Dead Sea Scrolls showed us is that our copy today is almost exactly identical. It proved that we can trust the version that we have today because it is so close to what was there thousands of years ago.
In all, the book provides 70 discoveries that document the historical accuracy of the scriptures.
They did not happen in a vacuum, and they're not made up, and the way we know this is because we have physical proof, and we can thank archaeology for that.
Each year, dozens of excavations go on like this one in biblical Shiloh, Israel's first capital. Two archaeologists who discovered physical proof of the Bible are Elat Mazar and Gabi Barkai. Mazar found the seal of King Hezekiah mentioned in the Hebrew scriptures.
This is unparalleled, unheard of, to come as close as you can imagine to a biblical figure, not to mention such a king as King Hezekiah. So to find his seal impression, it's almost touching him.
Barkai uncovered tiles and coins from the Second Temple period described in the New Testament.
In the book of Acts and in the Gospel of John, there is a mentioning of the eastern porch of the Temple Mount. We have the floors upon which the coins were rolling when Jesus turned upside down the temples of the money changers.
The book includes sections for easy reference to people, places, or things. People like King David or Pontius Pilate, places throughout Israel and the Middle East, and things like Hezekiah's tunnel or the pool of Siloam.
It's almost like Israel brings the Bible to life, and I think that's partly what makes Israel so special. You know, like when it talks about David being in the wilderness, and you see what the wilderness looks like there, that narrative makes much more sense. And within each section, it's alphabetized. I wanted everything to be very accessible, very easy to find while flipping through. Even within each artifact, there's an information box. Where the artifact was found, who found it, when did they find it, and what exactly it is.
Bassett Brody feels it's a great witnessing tool for both doubting Christians and skeptics.
When we talk about the Bible, it's so abstract to many people. But anytime you have physical proof, it's going to support what you're saying. And archaeology is the same way. Now that there's physical evidence, I think it makes the best witnessing tool of all. Because you can't really question something that's sitting right in front of you that you can see with your own eyes.
She also hopes the book will bring the Bible to life.
That was one of my goals, that if they read this book, or even parts of the book, they're going to walk away with something, having learned something about the Bible, about God, about Jesus.
Coming up, you may be looking at the next revolution in the internal combustion engine. Imagine an engine that produces more power with less energy. That's the revolutionary concept behind a new engine conceived in Israel. More than 150 years ago, the invention of the internal combustion engine changed history, eventually leading to the birth of automobiles, airplanes, and even rockets. Since then, however, there's really been no major modification until now.
One day, a weird guy named Shauli came and told us about an engine that has only one part, moving part, and very few parts, and it does not create a rotational movement. It sounded very far-fetched, but actually this was the beginning.
Gail Friedman, CEO of Aquarius Engines, offers a different concept.
The heart and soul of the engine is to take fuels or gas and convert it into rotational movement. Today we look at the role of the engine differently. We don't believe that the rotational engine will survive. And we can see that mobility is going toward electricity. So eventually what will turn the wheels will be an electric engine. The question is what will supply the energy for that engine.
Friedman believes his engine can supply that energy and will do so with only one moving part.
And now what you see is a cut of the engine. And this is a cylinder with a double-sided piston that slides from side to side. And one time the engine creates an explosion on the left side, we push the piston right, and one time the explosion will occur on the right side and will push the piston to the left. The gas exchange is going through the piston, through a hollow piston rod. So as you can see, there is only one moving part in this engine, no valves, no crankshaft, no other parts, which means low friction, which means higher efficiency.
Higher efficiency means less energy and lighter engines. The first major application for this engine is lighter and more efficient generators. Friedman believes this revolutionary development could make a major difference following a natural disaster like a hurricane or in undeveloped areas.
Imagine a generator like that in an African village or in Asia that you have to maintain every once in a while. You have to bring it in a place where the ways are very hard. And imagine now that one to be carried, to be deployed. The advantage of size and weight and maintenance, we think we're going to light places that are dark today and make lives easier.
And since lighter engines mean lighter and less costly cars, down the road it might transform the way we drive.
When somebody will come with a technology that will enable the mass market to adopt it, which means cheaper technology, this will be a turning point for the industry. And this is exactly what we're doing.
It might take a few years, but Friedman hopes his company will make the world a better place.
If we will be able to deliver the promise, then the global impact will be huge and will do some good for everybody.
These engines are one more chapter in Israel being the startup nation and a light unto the nations. Well, that's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.